Well, it's time to answer the question, did I heart hard eyes? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Welcome back into JC's Movies, where you can see all kinds of movie reviews and show content, TV series, especially the horror genre, superhero, and comedies. That's kind of right up my alley. So if you're into movies that are of that genre, be sure you hit the subscribe button. Follow along here to keep up with the news on such and all the reviews here on the channel, rankings, all of that good stuff here on JC's Movies. Appreciate it if you do that. And if you're in here watching this video, just take a second, hit that thumbs up button. Helps a shit ton with this YouTube algorithm. Helps it find more movie fans like yourself. But with no further ado, let's talk about Hard Eyes. I went and saw this back on Thursday. Wanted to wait, through the weekend because I like to do the spoiler reviews for the most part here on the channel. Every now and then I'll do a spoiler-free early type review. A lot of those will be out of theater reactions I put out as YouTube shorts right when I come out of the theater. So you may have saw some of my thoughts in that one, but now it's time to talk full expansive thoughts. Going to dive into spoilers too, so be warned if you haven't seen this yet. We are going to be talking about third act stuff. We're going to be talking all kinds of spoilers, so this is the point of no return. If you don't care about spoilers, want to continue on, that's fine. But if you haven't seen the movie, put a pin in this review, go watch it, come back, and then check out my spoiler filled thoughts, and then share some of yours in the comments, and I'd appreciate those interactions. But let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about Hard Eyes. All right, so Hard Eyes, directed by Josh Ruben, written by Christopher Landon, with a couple other co-writers, Philip Murphy and Michael Kennedy there. Main stars really Olivia, Holt, and Mason Gooding. A couple of, I guess you could almost call them cameos, because I didn't know who the two detectives would be, but you see them pop up, and it's Devon Sawa and Jordana Brewster, who I didn't even know either one of them two were in the movie. So when I popped up, I was like, Devon Sawa. This movie gets points right there for having Devon Sawa pop up, who, if you grew up in the era that I grew up in, he was a familiar face for a long time there. But nonetheless, Hard Eyes. And if you don't know how I do my spoiler reviews here, what I like to do is I just like to break it down kind of into three categories. We're going to talk the pros, the cons, and then the neither here nor there, which is kind of the mixed category. For this one, for Hard Eyes, I think I want to lead off with the neither here nor there. But before I get into the actual categorized stuff here from my notes, I just wanted to kind of give some of my overall thoughts, really, because I think that this was a movie that I would recommend you go see if you like slashers. It is, a holiday themed slasher, which is what really drew me to it. That's kind of some of my favorite things for the holiday themed slashers. Of course, Halloween being one of my main favorite films of all time. Obviously, as you guys know here that follow the channel and see the Michael Myers Tots masks in the background all the time and all that good stuff. But also, you guys know I love Christmas horror. I love all that holiday themed horror. So to get another one and to get a slasher, which is my favorite genre of horror, I was like, all right, let's go. Let's get into this shit. And I was ready. That's why I think it was, if it wasn't on my most anticipated list, it just missed out and was on the honorable mention. So this was a movie I was looking forward to. And I think it's funny because I compare it to Companion in a lot of ways, because they both were kind of February horror movies. I know Companion technically came out last day of January, but I really wasn't, Companion wasn't really so much on my radar as much as Hard Eyes was one I was really looking forward to. And I think at the end of the day, spoiler alert for my rating at the end, maybe I think I liked Companion a little bit better, but that's not to discourage Hard Eyes anything. I think this is still a good movie. I think just for me personally, there are some things that I would have liked them, some choices I would have liked them to make a little bit differently than what they ultimately did, because I see a lot of franchise potential in this, especially with how great I thought that the Hard Eyes killer looked, and some stuff that I wish that they would have done differently in the third act, which we're going to talk about now when we get into the pros, cons, and the neither here nor there. Let's lead off with the neither here nor there this time, because I think a lot of the pros and cons I have kind of tie in with one another, so we should do those back to back. So let's start off here with the mixed aspects for me in the neither here nor there category. So I think the opening scene, actually, for the most part, was one of my favorites of this scenes of this movie, because it's a great open to kind of show you, hey, we're going to go there as far as kills. We're going to use a lot of different weapons. I think that the Hard Eyes killer uses like 3 or 4 different weapons in the opening kill alone. You get good gore and you get really good camera work, which if I can praise anything for this film, it's kind of their camera work, especially during kind of the kill scenes and the gory scenes. Some of the stuff they did was really cool. But one thing that did, I was like, oh man, really? Was you had the typical, girl hiding in, a dark area trying to be quiet, covering her mouth, hiding from the killer in the opening scenes. I'm like, that's a little bit cliche there. a little bit of heavy exposition after the opening, but I thought the way that they used news reports to do it wasn't really a bad way to do it, and it really kind of flowed that along and let you know, hey, this Hard Eyes Killer's been at it for a while, people know about him, and we're kind of thrusting you into this world versus kind of trying to tell an origin story or anything like that. They just kind of used some heavy expository scenes. What they did it through a news report though, so it really did work well that way, I thought. And then after they have, the meet cute, you get the meet cute between Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt's character in the movie, which I thought both of them actually did pretty good performances, and I thought they had good chemistry. But after they have this meet cute at a coffee shop, and she's off to work, it's kind of predictable. Of course, he's the guy that pops up at her job that's supposed to be working with her to help with this ad campaign that she screwed up, and because it has all this death and shit, which that was actually pretty funny. That original ad campaign that she showed, based on all the deaths, famous like celebrities, criminals, or whatever. But nonetheless, I did think the movie had good needle drops, a lot of good needle drops. A lot of them were, of course, related to love songs. It really leaned into the romance side of the, Valentine's Day of, the month of February, whatever you want to call it. And they get some good needle drops because of that. But I thought I missed, like, I would have loved to have a classic, slasher type score. You get with the Jason theme, you get with Michael's theme. And I thought with this Hard Eyes Killer, who I really like the look of and really like a lot of aspects about him, I thought you could maybe have another classic slasher with this one. And I think if you got a classic slasher, you got to have that theme tied into it. This movie decided to go another way and kind of lean more in needle drops than necessarily a lot of score based pieces. But I did like the needle drops that they used when they did do that. Getting into something in the third act a little bit, that I talk about here in the Neither Here Nor There, nothing really related to the plot wise, but it just kind of relates to something that they did throughout this movie that I think will probably steer you either to really like this movie or to feel like, I don't know, because to me it kind of was a bit more obviously of a mixed aspect for me. That's why it's here, the Neither Here Nor There, but it really played a lot with rom-com tropes in Hard Eyes, and it really hit home for me because it was this weird gray area where the movie wants to be part rom-com and part slasher, I think. But for me, when it does the part rom-com thing, sometimes it feels like it's trying to parody rom-coms, right? And so if you've got those moments where you're trying to parody rom-coms, which I'm all for, I think that's a great way to go about it. Parody your rom-com half the time and then get serious and be a slasher the other part. I'm with that. But it tries to kind of, what I like to say, have its cake and eat its too. Have its cake and eat its too. What the fuck is that? Have its cake and eat it too, because they do those scenes where it feels like they're parodying rom-com, but then later in the movie they go like full rom-com and they want you to take it seriously and want you to hit you with it emotionally, and it's like, you've already got me to where I'm laughing during these scenes, and now you're trying to make a real scene here. I don't think you can do both of those things, because then when you try and get real with it, it didn't work for me there, especially the like final end to this movie, how it's just kind of wraps up a rom-com story almost. I'm like, I don't know. But then in the third act, what really drove it home for me, the fact that they were kind of parodying it a little bit, was she's hunting down the love interest, of course, Mason Gooding's character, at an airport, which how many rom-coms have you seen where he's going to be at the airport, I can find him, I can tell him I love him, and it's like she's trying to do that whole thing in the third act of this movie, and that's when I'm like, okay, this movie's definitely playing with rom-com tropes and seems like it's parodying a little bit, which I'm like, okay, that's cool. But then with the other moments where it tried to get serious, I'm like, I don't know. It wasn't for me necessarily there, but it lands here in the mixed category. Now, let's talk a little bit about the cons, because I think the pros do far outweigh the cons for me, but there are quite a few cons that kind of rubbed me the wrong way and maybe made this movie score a little bit lower than I probably went into it expecting it to score. But I also should say that I had really high expectations for this movie, as I kind of touched on a little bit earlier with my love of slashers and holiday themed horror movies. So maybe that hurt me a little bit as well, was having too high of expectations, because it seems like a lot of people really enjoyed it, maybe a little bit more than I did, even, not to say that I didn't enjoy it myself. But let's talk about some of the aspects that I didn't necessarily enjoy about it here, as we'll talk some cons. The meet cute at the coffee shop felt Hallmarkish, but like I said, at that point, I'm thinking, okay, they're doing this ironically. They're kind of wanting it to feel that way because they're kind of parodying a rom-com right here, because that was still early in the movie. But that was a con for me, that it kind of felt like a Hallmark movie at that point, or initially. Their chemistry did improve, and it started to feel less corny throughout the movie. They seemed like they tried to, but there initially seemed like they were leaning into the corniness of it on purpose, in my opinion. And if you didn't know that it was being done ironically, it just hits you like, man, this is kind of weird, sticks out like a sore thumb. So it was a con to me at that point. And then in the opening scene, I just had to laugh because the detectives are there, they're researching everything, And literally one of the guys asks, how do you know this is the Hard Eyes Killer? And literally right behind them, as they're asking that, there's a heart cut out inside of a heart made out of flowers. And I was like about to bust out laughing in the theater because I'm like, the guy's like, how do you know this is the Hard Eyes Killer? Meanwhile, directly in his eye line, a fucking heart of flowers with a heart inside. Oh, I don't know, man. I have no idea. Who else could it be? It could have been Freddie. You're right. Definitely no one that's obsessed with Valentine's Day or hearts and shit. So that just had to go in the cons for me because I'm like, come on, man. If you're gonna have somebody ask that, don't have the in the same shot, the heart and the flower of hearts. It's like, damn, really? Uh, Pretty big lull following the opening kill. I did talk about, there in the neither here nor there section, the opening a little bit, which I thought was super awesome. The way that they did that opening. You'll hear me talk a little bit about some of the shots from it that I thought were really cool in the pro section momentarily. But after that opening, until we get to the next kind of turn, when Olivia Holt's character finds the Hard Eyes Killer in her closet, it's a pretty big lull there, in my opinion, where I was, I didn't check my phone, but it was getting to that point where you were looking like, okay, how long has this been running? How far are we into this thing? So that was one of the down points for me, was from the opening kill until things pick up again. There was a decent sized lull there that's unfortunately falls here into the cons for me. And then the last little thing I want to talk about in the cons here ties into, the third act, kind of the reveal, which to me, that's kind of the biggest con, is the fact that there was a reveal is the biggest con to me about this movie. I think that the fact of when they revealed this tech guy and the things he said, he was kind of immediately like, well, that guy might be the killer right there. It just kind of threw this guy in, and they've given you a bunch of red herrings, and they throw this guy in that gives you a questionable line and stuff. And so that was kind of predictable, but they did do a good job of hiding the fact there was multiple killers. I think the fact that there was three of them kind of was like, Scream 6 just did three killers. I know in this one, it's a twist that it's a throuple and that it's a couple that gets their kicks off, that their fetish is like killing people on Valentine's Day. That's why this has happened year after year. Blah, 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 all that. Set that to the side, because to me, the biggest con for me in this movie is the fact that there was a killer reveal. What I was hoping more than anything was that this movie would end up being more Friday the 13th, more Halloween, more Jason, more Michael Myers than it would be Scream and Ghostface. And this movie definitely leaned into being more Scream and Ghostface type vibes. I think they could still potentially do a franchise, if you want to lean into that and have a different killer each type of movie. But if they were going to do a franchise thing, I was hoping that it was going to be more, traditional slasher based, where at the end of this, they think they killed the Hard Eyes Killer, and no, he's gotten away, and we don't find out who it is. Not necessarily the killer wins, but he does get away, and is still alive, or finds a way to come back, like we've seen, kind of the supernaturalness of some of the original OG slashers do in years past, versus throughout the Scream franchise, where, it's a different person donning the mask and being Ghostface every movie. I just was kind of more into the thought of this Hard Eyes Killer being this unstoppable force that just keeps coming back. But instead, they decided to lean into kind of the Scream aspect of it. And if they do continue this to be a franchise, it's going to be a different person every time, which, depending on how you feel about that, will maybe make you feel one way about the movie or another. But I was hoping that they wouldn't do that. Early on in the movie, when they first revealed the Hard Eyes Killer, I was like, man, I hope this isn't like a Scream type thing where they, reveal him at the end. Because I also think that really increases the chances of this only being a one-off movie. And with a movie I enjoyed that I think could have franchise potential, with a badass looking slasher that you could come out with, every February. Or every other February, maybe. I was hoping that it would just kind of be more along the lines of Michael and Jason, but I guess that's more depends on what your preference is. But that's kind of how I was feeling about it. So when we get to the end and there is actually a reveal, I was like, damn it. But I should have kind of figured that out, as much red herrings as they were giving us throughout, that they were going to give us a reveal to the end. But like I said, once that tech guy popped up in the police department and he says, hey, they call it the Hard Eyes Killer or whatever, I was immediately like, nah, man, I think you're the Hard Eyes Killer. Because at that point, I knew Mason Gooding was the red herring, because the first guy they capture and feel like is going to, and, are trying to pinpoint as a killer, next to never is the killer. So at that point, I knew it wasn't him, knew it was somebody else. Tech guy was the first one. I was like, okay, I think it might be you. And then Jordana Brewster there at the end, once it looks like they've killed the Hard Eyes Killer and she keeps offering to give him a ride, that's when I knew, okay, she's the other one. But when we get into the pros and talk a little bit about that reveal, I thought she was really good with the way that she kind of played things after she was revealed to be the killer. I liked her a lot in those final scenes of the movie. But that wraps up the cons for me. let's get into talking about some of those really good things that I enjoyed here with the pros. And then, of course, we'll wrap up with my rating for this movie at the end. Appreciate you guys sticking with me on this one. I got a lengthy list here, but that's because it's a movie that I, really had a lot of opinions about, and a movie that I really had a lot of expectations going in and was really anticipating. So, uh, going in the pros here, like I said, nice opening kill. I talked a lot about that opening. My favorite kill in that opening was when the knife goes through the camera lens in the front and then into the guy's head, and you see it come back out the other side. And the way that they shot that was really cool. I know they utilized CGI a little bit there, but the eyeball coming out the back of the head, through the eyeball and out the back of the head after going into the camera, I thought that was something cool I hadn't seen before. And then I also thought it was a nice touch that the killer was using a crossbow in the beginning with arrows. The arrows even have a little heart on them, so that's kind of like reference you to Cupid, with this being kind of a Valentine's themed slasher here with the Hard Eyes Killer. And then the first time you see Hard Eyes, my initial note was, man, he looks sick. You get this awesome look at him, and then you get a cool title drop right behind it. And I was like, at that point, I was like, oh, damn, this might be a new classic or something. That's how you were feeling with how good the opening was, how great the Hard Eyes Killer looked at that point. You were like, okay, this might be something special here. I love the fact that Hard Eyes was nationwide because he had been in Boston and Philly in prior years. And then, of course, this movie was taking place in Seattle. So I think having a nationwide slasher is really something that we hadn't seen before. So I like that aspect of it. A lot of the aspects that they used as far as the slasher side of things was concerned, I really enjoyed in this movie. Just wish they would have leaned into that stuff a little bit more, is my only kind of complaint with the way that this movie played out. But it is different. It is something new. They haven't really mixed rom-com and slasher like this before. You could maybe say My Bloody Valentine or something like that, or maybe Valentine, the 2001 movie. But I think that this did it kind of more so because it really leaned into the rom-com at a lot of times. But I love having a nationwide slasher. That's something different and new, in my opinion. The leads are very good, I thought. The favorite performance of Mason Gooding that I'd seen, I thought he absolutely killed this role. And the leads, I thought, had really good chemistry. I liked Olivia Holt. I remembered her from the Totally Killer movie. Was that last year or year before last? But she gives a good performance in this one as well. The fact of the turn that I was talking about, I'm interested in the cons. You get the opening kill, then you get this big lull, but then there's a quick turn. And that quick turn was an unpredictable jump scare, the way they played that off. There wasn't any music cut. You couldn't account the beats. You didn't see it coming because Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt are just kind of chilling in her apartment. She's going around, and then she opens up the closet, and bam, the Hard Eyes Killer's just in there all of a sudden. You're like, oh shit, here we go. And then the movie really picks up, from there moving forward. And I thought that was a nicely done, just kind of unpredictable jump scare of him being in the closet, and they didn't spoil it in the trailer like Halloween 2018 did. Hard Eyes being night vision on the Hard Eyes Killer was really super dope. You've seen him, I think, in the trailer or in pictures. Those hard eyes on his mask light up pink, but they're actually night vision, which gave me kind of flashbacks to Silence of the Lambs there in the final scene when the killer has the night vision there, Buffalo Bob or whatever. And one of my most praised aspects I touched on a little bit earlier was the good camera work during the kills. In the opening, I talked about kind of ironic that it's good camera work with the knife going through a camera actually on screen. But in the final act here, there is a shot at the drive-in, which, how about a drive-in massacre in the third act of this movie? That's pretty sweet. But there's a shot where there's a hole. Was it a gun? I can't remember how it happened. I think it might have been a gun. I can't remember. But I know I'm thinking it's a gun because Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 is what kept coming in my mind. There's a shot, there's a kill, and there's a hole in the person's head, and the camera kind of pulls back through the hole in their head. And the only other time I've ever seen that happen was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake in 2003. And I immediately was like, oh shit, TCM03, that's awesome. Because that shot with the bullet hole there in TCM03 was so cool. And they kind of did a version of that in the third act of the Hard Eyes movie here, which, as much as I didn't like them, kind of leaning a lot into the rom-com aspect, whether they were trying to parody or whether they were trying to be serious, because at times it just kind of felt like the two movies that they were trying to blend together didn't necessarily blend together. But the slasher stuff they did was really, really well done. I do want to drive that home. And as I said, Jordana Brewster was good after the reveal, but once she was trying to take Mason Gooding and give him a ride, I kind of knew she's involved with the Hard Eyes Killer as well. But the false ending at the drive-in is a good fake out because there's still a good bit of movie left after that. And I love the kind of wrap up of things with Jordana Brewster, and you reveal that, you know, it's two killers with the fetishes, with her and that tech guy, and then Mason Gooding and Olivia Holt have to fight them off, and that's a good final action scene. Don't like how it just wraps up kind of with a rom-com with the marriage proposal between the two, which, hey, good for them. They had good chemistry. Glad y'all are getting married. But just kind of ends on a weird note for me with an ending. It's like almost two different endings. Hey, here's our slasher ending. Here's our rom-com ending. But some people may really like that because it's just, you know, super different. I overall enjoyed the movie despite some of the cons that I've talked about here and how I wish it would have been more slasher and less rom-com at times. I think overall I've bounced back on where I'm going to go with the rating for this movie. I think I've sold myself going through this review and, you know, remembering some of the things that I really liked on it. Going into it, I was thinking maybe a 7.5, but I think Hard Eyes for me, my final rating at the end of the day here for this spoiler review is going to be an 8.0 for Hard Eyes. I do enjoy it. I'm glad we got another slasher. And even though they're going to do it by revealing the killer at the end of each film, I hope that they continue to make this a franchise. To me, that kind of lessens the potential of that happening, but it seems like it's getting a lot of good reviews from critics, so maybe that's good for the future. The more slashers, the better, in my opinion, and maybe in the future, they'll lean more into the gore and the kills, which I'd like to see, but who knows, if they continue to blend the two, seems like a lot of people like that as well. But those are just my thoughts. That's my rating. Would love to hear yours. Throw them in the comments. Always appreciate those interactions here on JC's Movies. Hit the thumbs up button before you head out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more horror movie reviews, as well as superhero and comedy on the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning into this one, and I will catch you on the next one.